Hi, this is Tom Siddell. I'm the guy that does Gunnerkrigg Court, and this is the first in a series of short videos where I'll be going back over the comic and sharing my thoughts on it chapter by chapter. So let's start with Chapter 1, The Shadow and the Robot. You might notice that this page is slightly different to the one that you'd see at the beginning of the webcomic. This is actually the version from the book, where I took the picture of Annie away from the bottom right. I put her there originally because I felt that the first page was a little bit boring, and I wanted to show people the main character straight away. But I didn't feel that was necessary in the book version. And this is the first real page of the comic. And the whole chapter really was a way for me to find my footing and get a handle on drawing a comic, since Gunnerkrigg was really my first comic I'd ever really done. So I didn't spend too long thinking about it beforehand. I knew that I just wanted to get started drawing and writing it. So the whole chapter really is an opportunity to lock things in place, things like color palettes and character designs and the feel of the writing, which, although a lot of these things have changed over time, I think even right from the start, we'll see a lot of common themes that I've been able to stick with. So, we see Annie and Shadow. They meet for the first time, and I wanted to establish this as a very lonely comic. Aside from this jerk here, you really don't see very many other characters in this chapter, except for Robot, who we'll see for the first time in a moment. And that's something I wanted to get across with the feel of the comic. Just the feeling of being a new kid in this giant school, which, for all intents and purposes, is just a vast, sprawling industrial complex, she describes it as. And here we start to see the layout of the court, where there apparently is a giant ravine that separates the court from the Gillity Wood, and the Annan Waters is what separates the two. The Annan Waters is actually the title of a song that I like by Kate Rusby. So geographically, it's not actually the River Annan, which is up in Scotland somewhere, I think. And we have the first mention here of not only the impassable ravine, but also the fact that Shadow is hesitant to go down there himself, and although he cannot say why, he's not able to cross on his own. So Annie, of course, decides that the easiest way will be constructing a robotic walking device, which of course she can't do. And on this page, I was sort of establishing the kind of humor that Annie would find in the environment of the court, because it's a seemingly strange place with weird signs around and doors that may or may not lead anywhere, and we find here that there just happens to be a room full of spare robot parts. So she goes in, nicks box spare number 13, takes it back to her study, and has a very strange face while she looks at the robot parts. Anyway, she sticks the robot together. Luckily, she doesn't need to have a lot of robotic knowledge like certain other characters that may appear later on in the comic. All she has to do is just basically click it together and turn him on. And here's Robot. He's a happy guy, and he's more than happy to help Annie and this Shadow try and cross the bridge so that Shadow could go back to the forest. So that night, Annie, Robot, and Shadow head back to the steps, and they set off. And Annie says goodbye. Shadow and Robot both walk away. At this point, this late in the chapter, I had a pretty good feeling about how I was going to work on the comic and sort of where I was going to take the plot. And I was already at this point starting to establish certain elements that may come back later. For example, on this page, we see the first appearance of the TikToks. There's one just watching Robot walk on by, and Robot makes it across, no problem. Gets Shadow over to his Shadow family, apparently, and walks off into the forest. Never to be seen again. And then this page finishes with this jerk again, who is never in the comic again, and I kind of wish he was never in the comic in the first place. And that's it, that's the first chapter. This is the first bonus page. I felt that I wanted to do a bonus page between each chapter, just to give a bit of a break between the end of a chapter and the start of a new one. And so I thought I would just fill them with random stuff, and I used this first one as an opportunity to explain how house systems work. And this is actually based on the house system of my school. I was in Quezlet North, just like Annie was. Generally there's 30 kids per class, and by the time you get to sixth form, you're all lumped together, and class and house is not really that important anymore. So that's it, that's the end of the first chapter, and come back again for chapter 2, Schoolyard Myths.